In October 2019, Hillary Clinton was interviewed by political strategist David Plouffe on his podcast, Campaign HQ. During the interview, Clinton pontificated about the 2020 election.
They're also going to do third party again. And I'm not making any predictions, but I think they've got their eye on somebody who's currently in the Democratic primary and are grooming her to be the third party candidate.
First off, Clinton is saying that Republicans are grooming a Democrat to become the third party candidate. Now, while she didn't say the name of this somebody in the podcast, a spokesperson for Clinton later confirmed that she was referring to none other than Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard.
She's the favorite of the Russians. They have a bunch of sites and bots and other ways of supporting her so far. And that's assuming Jill Stein will give it up, which she might not, because she's also a Russian asset.
Agent,
yeah, she's a Russian asset. I mean, totally.
So according to Clinton, Jill Stein, the 2016 presidential candidate for the Green Party, is a Russian asset. Then, says Tulsi Gabbard, who is a major in the Hawaii Army National Guard and who is currently serving her 4th term in Congress, is also a Russian asset. On top of that, David Plouffe, the former campaign manager and senior advisor to President Barack Obama, agreed with her. And in case you missed it, he even suggested that Jill Stein is a Russian agent.
Because she's also a Russian asset.
Agent,
yeah, she's a Russian asset. I mean, totally.
Classy. Clinton's theory that Gabbard would siphon votes away from the Democrats doesn't hold water, as Gabbard is currently more popular with conservatives and libertarians and would likely take votes away from Donald Trump, as seen in this very, very scientific poll that I posted on YouTube. But none of that matters because Gabbard has repeatedly stated that she will not run as an independent or as a third-party candidate.
Is there any scenario in which you would run as a third-party candidate
No.
in 2020?
No.
Okay, pretty clear.
It's incredible to me, honestly, how many times I get asked that question, even just over the last 72 hours, over and over and over again. And over and over and over again, my answer is still the same.
So where is this all coming from? Well, for starters, back in 2015, Congresswoman Gabbard was a vice chair for the Democratic National Committee. Gabbard criticized then chairwoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz and her decision to only hold 6 Democratic presidential debates during the 2016 cycle compared to the 11 that the Republicans had scheduled. A shorter debate schedule was widely seen as advantageous to Hillary Clinton. And consider, during the 2008 cycle, the Democrats held 26 debates. So for her criticism, the DNC leadership took steps to punish Gabbard by disinviting her from the first Democratic debate being held in Las Vegas in October 2015.
As you know, I've been pretty vocal about calling out for more debates. I've been calling for more debates to give the American people the opportunity to hear from these presidential candidates, to listen to what they've got to say, to hold them accountable for their views and their positions. Because that differentiated from the decision that the chairwoman made from the DNC, I was told that I was no longer welcome to come to the debate.
So in February 2016, Gabbard went on NBC's Meet the Press to make an announcement.
Well, first of all, I am resigning from the DNC so that I can support Bernie Sanders for president.
But that was not the only reason. While the DNC publicly stated that it was taking a neutral stance with all the candidates, Gabbard privately accused them of being bought and sold by the Clinton campaign. And in July 2016, Gabbard was vindicated when WikiLeaks released stolen emails from the DNC. Emails which showed that the DNC was being far from neutral when it came to Senator Bernie Sanders running as a Democrat. Despite being an independent, Sanders decided to game the system by running as a Democrat so that he could go toe-to-toe with Clinton in the Democratic debates, and the DNC was not happy about it. So Gabbard quit the DNC over her principles, unlike Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who was forced to resign over the embarrassment of trying to undermine Sanders in favor of Clinton.
The DNC was not running a fair operation, that they were supporting Secretary Clinton. So what I suggested to be true 6 months ago turns out, in fact, to be true. I'm not shocked, but I am disappointed.
But for Sanders, it was too little too late, as he had endorsed Hillary Clinton just 2 weeks prior to the leaks, and he was helpless to do anything about it. So whenever Hillary Clinton talks about meddling in the US elections, it's deeply ironic considering how the DNC practically handed her the nomination. I guess what goes around comes around. So in response to Hillary Clinton's Russian asset slander, Tulsi Gabbard responded in a series of tweets. Great. Thank you, Hillary Clinton. You, the queen of warmongers, embodiment of corruption, and personification of the rot that has sickened the Democratic Party for so long, have finally come out from behind the curtain. From the day I announced my candidacy, there has been a concerted campaign to destroy my reputation. We wondered who was behind it and why. Now we know. It was always you through your proxies and powerful allies in the corporate media and war machine, afraid of the threat I pose. It's now clear that this primary is between you and me. Don't cowardly hide behind your proxies. Join the race directly. So while there's some hyperbole and conspiracy theory here, Gabbard is not entirely wrong. Over and over again, members of the press have gone out of their way to smear her. First, NBC published an article in February 2019 stating, several experts who track websites and social media linked to the Kremlin have also seen what they believe may be the first stirrings of an upcoming Russian campaign of support for Gabbard. But as Glenn Greenwald of The Intercept quickly pointed out, the only expert cited by NBC in support of its key claim was the firm New Knowledge. In December 2018, the New York Times reported that during the 2017 Alabama special election, New Knowledge orchestrated an elaborate false flag operation that planted the idea that the Moore campaign was amplified on social media by a Russian botnet. So NBC completely trusted a cybersecurity firm that has had first-hand involvement in United States election interference designed to depress turnout among Republicans. I will also point out that NBC published a similar article about Dr. Jill Stein, which cited a report that was prepared by, wait for it, New Knowledge.
There have been reports that that Russian apparatus that interfered in 2016 is potentially trying to help your campaigin. Why do you think that is?
Cite those reports and their credibility.
Well, the Russian propaganda machine, we did an analysis actually.
I just want to point out.
News.
I want to point out that that NBC article has been debunked and disproven.
By whom?
Because I would ask you to look at the credibility of the sources and the so-called experts.
Well, I'm certainly not going to sit here and say that my colleagues did not do their due diligence.
Other journalists
I do know what our standards are here.
Other journalists have debunked and disproven the so-called experts that have been cited in that article.
By the way, New Knowledge just rebranded and changed their name to Yonder. And I'm sure that it had nothing to do with the embarrassment of being caught trying to manipulate an election. So the NBC News article is very likely the source of Hillary Clinton's Russian sites and bots remark, but of course the damage is done because people believe what they want to believe, including New York Times and CNN contributor Wajahat Ali. Russian bots trolling me after my criticism of Tulsi Gabbard last night. I wonder why. Beware the Russian bots and their promotion of Tulsi Gabbard and sowing racial discord, especially around Kamala Harris. Russian bots have an affinity for Gabbard and are also using disinformation to sow racial discord like they did in 2016. Of course, Wajahat doesn't show an example of the disinformation by Russian bots. He's too busy misspelling the word discord. Congresswoman Gabbard has also been criticized for meeting with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in early 2017 while on a fact-finding mission in Syria.
But obviously Bashar al-Assad is responsible for thousands of deaths and millions of people being displaced during this 5-year-long civil war. Did you have any compunctions about meeting with somebody like that, giving him any sort of enhanced credibility because a member of the United States Congress would meet with someone like that?
Whatever you think about President Assad, the fact is that he is the president of Syria. In order for any peace agreement, in order for any possibility of a viable peace agreement to occur, there has to be a conversation with him.
Months later, on April 4th, 2017, it was reported that there was a sarin gas attack in the town of Khan Sheikhoun, Syria. Gabbard responded to the chemical attack, tweeting, "Horrific Syria chemical attack is a war crime that must be thoroughly condemned. Whoever is found responsible, be it the Syrian government, Al-Qaeda, or ISIS, all have access to chemical weapons, must be held accountable." The United States quickly made a determination that it was the work of the Syrian government. On April 7th, the United States launched 59 Tomahawk cruise missiles from the Mediterranean Sea into Syria, aimed at Shayrat Air Base, which is controlled by the Syrian government. Gabbard was critical of the US missile strike against Syria.
Well, last time I checked, Wolf, Congress had the authority and the responsibility for declaring war, for authorizing the use of military force. So whether the president or the Pentagon or the Secretary of State says that they have the evidence, the fact remains that they have not brought that evidence before Congress. They have not brought that evidence before the American people, and they have not sought authorization from Congress to launch this military attack on another country.
And Gabbard has a point, considering that Syria is not at war with the US. The only reason we had troops there was to hunt down ISIS.
Who do you believe is responsible for that chemical attack that killed so many civilians, including so many children?
Here's the issue, Wolf, is what I believe, what you believe, or others believe is irrelevant. What matters here is the evidence and the facts. If President Assad is found to be responsible after an independent investigation for these horrific chemical weapons attacks, I'll be the first one to denounce him, to call him a war criminal, and to call for his prosecution, the International Criminal Court. Make sure that those consequences are there.
This is very clear. If there is evidence that Assad was responsible for the chemical weapons attack, he should be prosecuted for it.
Do you think chemical weapons were used at all in Syria?
Absolutely.
And so if it was not Assad, who would have used them?
There has been reports that chemical weapons have been used not only by the Syrian regime, but by other bad actors and terrorists within Syria.
On Gabbard's campaign website, she suggests that there is evidence that the attack on Khan Sheikhoun may have been staged by opposition forces for the purpose of drawing in the United States to retaliate against the Syrian government. Gabbard also lists multiple inconsistencies with the UN's report on the matter found by world-renowned explosive weapons expert Dr. Theodore Postel of MIT. Among Dr. Postel's findings, the UN report claims that this crater in the road was the result of a Syrian airstrike and is the source of the sarin release. However, Dr. Postel and his team have determined that the crater was formed by an explosion of an improvised artillery rocket. Furthermore, that this is an empty artillery rocket motor casing and not a vessel that contains sarin. This means that the release of sarin gas would had to have occurred at a different location, and if it didn't come from a Syrian airstrike, then that would mean that we do not definitively know how or where the sarin was released, let alone who released it. In February 2018, 10 months after the events at Khan Sheikhoun, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis told reporters at the Pentagon that the US had no evidence that the Syrian government had ever used sarin against its citizens. The United States, without evidence, launched $84 million worth of Tomahawk missiles into Syria to retaliate for a Syrian attack that may or may not have happened. Womp womp.
You met Bashar al-Assad in 2017. Do you believe that Assad is a war criminal?
I think that the evidence needs to be gathered, and as I have said before, if there is evidence that he has committed war crimes, he should be prosecuted as such.
Gabbard could not have been any clearer, and based on the evidence, or lack thereof, her answer was perfect. But apparently, CNN's Dana Bash has problems comprehending the English language.
But you're not sure now.
Everything that I have said requires that we take action based on evidence.
And instead of being praised for her reasoning and her search for the truth, Gabbard is repeatedly painted as unequivocally siding with Assad.
You know, there are people who will watch this and have heard your previous comments and wonder what's going on here. Why you met with Assad?
I'm interested in the truth.
Why it looks like you were very cozy with Assad, and why you've sort of taken his side in this argument. What would you say to that?
That is a line that comes from political opponents or people who are not interested in actually confronting the truth about U.S. foreign policy.
And one of those political opponents is Senator Kamala Harris, who was knocked down a few pegs by Gabbard during the second Democratic presidential debate.
She put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California.
And when asked to respond to Gabbard, instead of defending her record, well, you can guess what Harris did instead.
This coming from someone who has been an apologist for an individual, Assad, who has murdered the people of his country like cockroaches. She who has embraced and been an apologist for him in a way that she refuses to call him a war criminal. I can only take what she says in her opinion so seriously.
And that is the definition of a smear. But you know what? Maybe I'm all wrong here. If Harris says Assad is a war criminal, then we should trust her. I mean, she was a prosecutor, right? So she knows when the law has been broken.
I'm just glad to see that the process is beginning to really do the investigation into Rudy Giuliani. He has clearly broken many laws.
Are there specific laws you believe Giuliani has broken or may have broken?
Well, I don't know. We're going to find out. But I think that the range includes not only abuse of power and perhaps misstatement and mischaracterization of his role and his responsibilities, but I also really do wonder just instinctively whether there's been any bribery associated with Giuliani's conduct.
I guess she instinctively knows that Assad is a war criminal. She's going to make a great president.
He has clearly broken many laws.
As for Tulsi Gabbard securing the Democratic nomination, it's a long shot at best. But she has pledged not to run for a fifth term in Congress, so she's all in. And it's possible that she could be Biden or Bernie's VP pick if either secures the Democratic presidential nomination. Anyway, thanks for watching, sharing, and hitting that like button, and I hope to see you all next time.